Hey guys, we're back for Inside the Story this week. We've got Kilian Laverty from our policy team. Another, as I always say, Pennsylvanian. We're here to do the Mehmet Oz update. So, what was the most recent thing that happened here? The Pennsylvania Senate race, Mehmet Oz versus John Fetterman or Fetterwoman, whatever you want to say. Fetterman has finally agreed to a Senate debate, October 25th.
Yeah, so the race in Pennsylvania has really heated up the past couple of weeks. Oz has closed the gap noticeably between him and Fetterman, and a lot of that are Republicans coming home because it was a bruising primary.
Sure.
Oz only won by a couple hundred votes, and conservatives are reluctant to trust him because he's somebody who just popped up in Pennsylvania circles. Mm-hmm. Now, he's been going after Fetterman pretty hard about his just reluctance to do any debates. If you remember, on election night, Fetterman was in a hospital bed. He had a stroke.
Yeah.
The guy can barely speak. If you listen to some of his speeches, he's saying it's sensory overload. He's fine one-on-one, but large groups, all that kind of stuff is bugging him out. But Oz is trying to hammer home the point of, hey, this guy, he's recovering from a stroke. He is not fit to be a senator at the moment. And in fact, he is refusing debates. There's a slate of like 4 or 5 debates that were supposed to occur. Fetterman's agreeing to just one after early voting's already begun and mail-in and all that.
That's what
it's an absolute joke.
Bring up is that so October 25th, mail ballots will have been out for a while before that. And if he's going to look terrible in this debate, people could have already voted for him by that point with all these mail ballots.
Yeah, we're looking at like a week or two out of the actual election. Mm-hmm. Most people have already had their minds made up at that point. And it's imperative that people actually hear the differences between Fetterman and Oz and hear the stuff Fetterman believes. This is an absolute left-wing nut job. The lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, before that, mayor of Braddock, but he is a Bernie Sanders ideologue. He campaigned for the guy. He endorsed Sanders. I think Sanders has endorsed him. Could be wrong about that. But he is absolutely to the left of Elizabeth Warren, and this guy refuses to go out in front of Pennsylvanians and talk about what he actually believes and what his ideas are.
Mm-hmm. Now, you talked about Republicans coming home. Mm-hmm. That's what's been helping Oz close the gap in the polls there. What are the kind of groups that have to come home even more for Oz to actually bring him across the finish line there? I know that there was another candidate in the primary that was more along the the MAGA lines, even though she wasn't endorsed by Trump. Is it really he's trying to bring some of the more MAGA voters back onto his side here, really consolidate the conservative team? What does he have to do to be successful?
Yeah, so Pennsylvania is just such a geographically diverse and electorally diverse state, from east to west, the counties around Philadelphia up to Scranton, to western PA around Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. Now, if you look at where Oz really struggled in McCormick's heavy districts, we're on the western side of the state. Mm-hmm. Oz is claiming the Philadelphia collar counties as his home.
And who was the other candidate?
McCormick.
But there's one.
Kathy Barnett.
That's one.
Yeah, so she is. She was someone who is very favored by conservative grassroots, but she claimed as her home as well, Delaware County, I believe, or Chester, I think it was Delco, but another Philadelphia collar county. So she really ate into Oz there. So if he is going to cobble together a winning coalition, he's got to get votes from the Philadelphia suburbs. He's got to get them from those Obama-Trump voters, those Scranton voters, just like Donald Trump got in 2016. He's got to go out west and do better from where he really struggled with during the primaries.
Sure.
There are a lot of conservative voters in western PA as you get closer to Ohio. The path for a Republican to win statewide in Pennsylvania, you've got to appeal everywhere. If you look at even the two-term Senator Pat Toomey, both of his elections were razor thin, and he had to get votes from all over the state.
You'd think maybe that Mastriano, the Republican candidate for governor in this race or this cycle, might actually help him here, kind of consolidating that base, because he's definitely real favored by conservative, real conservative base kind of guy. Maybe he will be the one who brings Oz over the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the group that Oz historically has been really struggling with, I mean, I think there was an Emerson poll that showed of the suburban voters, the kind of moderates that left during the Trump years, Oz is running neck and neck with Fetterman. They were both tied at like 47% in an Emerson poll.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's doing fine there. It is bringing out those conservative voters that don't trust him, and having someone like Mastriano on the ticket with him can only help him in that respect.
Sure. So let's leave Pennsylvania and come back to Washington, D.C., where we are right now, here in the swamp. Can you give us a little bit of a Hill update real quick? What are we looking at, going into the midterm election and kind of just closing out the year?
Yeah, I mean, August recess is over. Both houses of Congress are back in session. The House came back this week, and the big thing on their plate right now is to get spending done. I mean, the federal spending, the federal budget runs out the end of the fiscal year on September 30th. So if they don't get either an omnibus package, which contains the 12 separate appropriations bills, passed by the end of the month, or a continuing resolution, which would keep funding constant. It wouldn't increase or decrease spending, would just keep things constant.
Kicking the can down the road.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Kicking the can down the road. A CR, continuing resolution. If they don't get either of those done by the end of the month, government shuts down. Now, especially close to an election, there's no appetite to shut down the government for the most part. And what conservatives and Chip Roy and that kind of contingent in the House are advocating for, and what conservatives are looking for, is a CR that goes past into the 118th Congress. So not until January of next year, because if we're thinking Republicans have at least one or maybe both houses of Congress, that gives them a real stake in the appropriations process and a chance to constrain spending a little bit. So
Republicans are trying to move this to next year so that they can actually, have a better chance at stopping some of the spending, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, look, any CR that passes needs to get 10 votes out of the Senate. They need to break a filibuster to do it. So Republicans have the power to stop it, and they need the idea is to get any CR must go into January of next year, so we don't get another Schumer, Pelosi, Biden budget.
Absolutely. And we still have to hold some Republicans accountable to actually cut spending, which is why I'm going to bring up Elise Stefanik, is current GOP Conference Chair.
Yes.
So that's the leadership position in the House for Republicans. It looks like Byron Donalds is challenging her. He threw his hat in the race to replace her as chair, and he's one of our guys here at FreedomWorks. He's an ardent conservative, real fiscal conservative, a guy who believes in liberty. What can we do to, try and push this guy and give him all the help he needs to, what would be good if he was conference chair? What would he help out with here?
Yeah, well, if you look at the conference chair position, I mean, Stefanik has it because Cheney was ousted earlier this year, Liz Cheney.
Yeah.
Even before primary, this was her leadership role. I believe it's the third highest ranking Republican in House leadership. It is the person that is supposed to emblemize or drive the GOP House agenda. And that means we need a true conservative in there. I mean, this is a position that is elected by the conference members, by the Republicans that we send to Washington. And we can go with of course the Elise Stefaniks of the world, those establishment figures that have gone along to get along, and frankly haven't lived by conservative principles historically. I mean, we haven't had a balanced budget in a quarter century. And even then, that wasn't a balanced budget. That was one that was set to balance.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's talk a little bit about Stefanik in general. Like, you're talking about spending here. Inflation's through the roof. That's driven, a lot of that's driven by Democrat spending bills. And Stefanik in the past has not been very great on spending. I mean, great on economic initiatives in general. She voted for a lot of terrible budgets when she was in the House. When Republicans controlled the House, she was no help there.
She voted against the Trump tax cuts.
Exactly.
I mean, these are easy votes for conservatives. I mean, who wants to vote against letting middle-class families keep more money in their pockets, more of their hard-earned paychecks? And she stood against that. She stood against President Trump's tax cuts, and you have members like freshmen like Byron Donalds who have come in, stood by conservative principles, voted the way that they said they would back at home, and have really are rising stars within the party. I think it would be great to have somebody like him in that leadership role.
Exactly. And in this leadership role conference chair is a messaging role. You're the one who's in charge of party messaging. And, if you're going to say one thing and do another, how can voters actually trust Republicans, to give them power to put them in the majority there when she's sitting at like a 62% on our scorecard right now, and Byron Donalds is at like a 92. I mean, the answer is right there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, over the past 2 years, since Byron Donalds has been in Congress, he's only had something like one or out of 20 votes against the scorecard, which is meant to emblemize the conservative grassroots here.
Sure.
Stefanik is just the very embodiment of the swamp in that respect. She has not taken nearly the amount of tough votes that Byron has to stand up to that Washington machine and unleash conservative principles.
And even to be fair here, Republicans are in the minority. It's much easier to vote and be at least make yourself look like a conservative when you're in the minority, because you can oppose all these bills. But she hasn't even done that.
Yeah, no, she hasn't.
62%,
She historically has never done it. We have a track record here. And it is nothing but failing conservative grassroots voters, failing conservative principles. And going back to it, voting against the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, how wild is that?
Yeah.
And you want to lead the Republican conference, and you're not willing to stick your neck out and take a leadership role in a middle-class tax cut, something that spurred the greatest economic conditions in most people's lifetimes in 2019 pre-pandemic. It was great. It was tremendous. And we have mass deregulation under the Trump administration and those tax cuts to thank for it. That real comprehensive tax reform.
Yep. And then, she opposed leaving Paris climate.
Yeah.
She voted for, I think, FISA reauthorization, so for more spying. I mean, I think that our call to action is to have our activists go out there and let your member know, do not support Elise Stefanik for conference chair.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's more of the same from the Republican leadership with her in that position.
Totally. So just another race to watch that's not exactly a midterm race. But Kilian, thanks for coming on today. And thanks, everyone, for watching.
Thanks for having me.